everyone, it's Nikki Kinzer. If you're tired of the daily struggle to manage tasks and time, you're not alone. I'm excited to let you know that enrollment is now open for our GPS Planning Membership Program. GPS is a vibrant community where we tackle ADHD head-on with weekly planning sessions, personalized resources, and real support. From beginners to advanced planners, our program meets you where you are and helps you grow. Don't miss this chance to reframe your ADHD experience from chaos to control. Enrollment closes January 29th. Head over to takecontroladhd.com and secure your spot today.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright, and right over there is Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Hi. Happy New Year. This is our, I mean, it's not, technically,
no,
it's not the first
third.
show.
It's the third New Year show. You might want to actually
No, I don't, because you know why? This is a pitch. If you were a member, a supporting member of the Patreon, then you would have heard this when it was recorded as our very first live stream of the new year. And you would have heard a whole lot of things that are going to feel 2 weeks dated by the time you listen to them. But I promise they were new at the time. And we were back then 2 weeks ago, very, very excited to be back and recording together. And our first show of 2025, New Year was good. And we're ready to kickstart this season. We've got a great lineup of episodes, and we're excited to be here doing that. Today, we are talking about, I believe it was Melissa's experience that she shared in our back channel, talking about the language of limitation. And that got me going.
It sure did.
It did. And so I made an outline, and you've just assigned me to talk about it.
Yes. And I'm going to comment through it.
All right, we're going to do that. I'm very excited about it. Before we get started, though, head over to our website, takecontroladhd.com. You can get to know us a little bit better, listen to the show right there on the site, or subscribe to the mailing list, and we will send you an email each time a new episode is released. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, or Pinterest, or Blue Sky at Take Control ADHD. But and let me just say, this is now 2 weeks dated. If you haven't read up on what Meta is doing with their trust and safety teams and their content moderation, you really should, and consider your relationship with Facebook now. So, Mom, aunts and uncles who are listening to the show, if you're still on Facebook, go see his thing and see if you still want to be there. It makes me so mad. God, I'm fired up. I am fired up. We'll talk about that another time. Get ready for Coffee with Pete, though. We're going to read some terms and conditions. It's going to be very exciting. But we really would love you to join us in Discord. That's where the ADHD community lives. It is super easy to jump in there into the public chat channel. Just visit takecontroladhd.com/Discord, and you will be whisked over to the general invitation and login page. If you're looking for a little more, particularly if this show has ever touched you or helped you understand your relationship with ADHD in a new way, we invite you to support the show directly through Patreon. Patreon is listener-supported podcasting, and with a few bucks a month, you can help guarantee that we continue to grow the show. You get access to our secret members-only Discord channel. You get access at one tier to me and Nikki throughout the month in chat sessions and Coffee with Pete sessions, and we would love to see you there in person. Once again, visit patreon.com/the ADHD podcast to learn more. All right. The language of limitation. So go ahead.
It's a great title.
Start a fire, like in your hearth.
Yes.
Get a fire going. Turn the lights down. Get a snifter of brandy, because we're going
listen to Pete.
We're going to talk about words.
Yes.
And here's the thing that's interesting. So we did months and months ago. We guested on a whole bunch of other people's podcasts, OPPs.
OPPs.
And we
we were down with the OPPs.
We were down with the OPPs on other people's podcasts. And today, as we record this, two of them went live. Brooke Schnittman's show, which was delightful. That's live in Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. And Ozil DeBastos' show, The Creator Factor. I did a solo jam on his show. And And as I was listening back to them, because it's been months, I just kind of wanted to hear, what did I say? It reminded me of the story that I was telling about uh, a friend when I was a child who was living with ADHD back when only the most extreme manifestations of ADHD were caught, right? And and that reminded me of the echoes of childhood that we carry through to our adult language and the way we talk about ourselves with ADHD. Criticism, like with labels like lazy and spacey and hyper, right?
Yeah.
Not used in conjunction with hyper focus, but used in conjunction with hyperactive, right?
Right.
This
Can't
sort
sit
of
still.
can't sit still.
Hmm.
Frequent instructions on how to behave, how to sit still, how to stand still, how to use your hands, stop putting your hands in, stop chewing on your collar, like those kinds of things become internalized as negative scripts in
Hmm.
our adult lives.
Hmm.
And I I know that we living with ADHD without doing the work to understand our internal language don't recognize it because it's so internalized. It's such a habit, the way we talk to ourselves and the way we carry on a not good enough narrative, right? These, a lifetime of unmet expectations and comparisons to our neurotypical siblings or peers leads to this sort of foundational self-deprecating language in our lives.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and yeah, it definitely carries into adulthood and gets worse sometimes, right? I mean, it just what feels as a child, it feels bad, but it can feel really bad as an adult because you just have you're accumulating these experiences over and over and over again, and
Yeah.
it's hard to forget or to believe that they're not true.
Right, right. So I mean, I actually, just to give an example, I actually put a giant list in our script document
Hmm.
of language that fits in this. And I don't want to read necessarily all of them, but as you scan the list, do you see any of these that strike you as particularly sinister for the people you work with ADHD?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the very first one that you put was just. And it's interesting because I use that word a lot more than I probably need to.
Hmm.
And there's sometimes where I'll use the word where I think it's supposed to be used, but then when I was reading through your material and just thinking through like what we were talking about, just is also a very triggering word because it's minimizing whatever it is that you're about to talk about.
Hmm.
And so when we say just do it, like that's not as easy as just getting
Right,
up and doing it. This is just a small assignment. Well, it may be to you, but to me, it feels really big because I don't know what I'm doing.
right,
Like I even think about like when you came and visited me over the break to help me with my monitor. Like I'm watching everything you're doing, and I'm thinking, there's no way I would have figured this out. I would have stopped, like, because it was, but for you, it's just putting up a monitor. Doesn't feel like a big thing for you.
hmm,
Um, simply is definitely another word like that. That
yeah,
what is simple to one person is not necessarily simple to somebody else.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean,
And
a lot of these things.
those minimizing words are really tricky. So those are, I categorize those as minimizing words and phrases, like just and only. Those came from Melissa's example, directly from the GPS session, I believe,
Yeah,
where that came up. But a little bit, merely, simply, at least, kind of, sort of, somewhat, right? Those languages of
confusing.
minimizing can be confusing because in some cases they can be used to simplify a concept. And we get in the habit of using those interchangeably with descriptions of ease. What should be easy for one person should be
Hmm.
easy for the other person. right? And
Mhm.
and that's where we get ourselves tied up. But self-deprecating phrases, I may be wrong, but, or this might be a dumb question, or I'm a dummy. I'm not sure about this, but this may be silly, but, right?
Yeah.
Those kinds of self-deprecating phrases get in the way of us all the time. Hedging language, hedging language, maybe, possibly, perhaps, I guess, I think, I suppose, probably. We pre-apologize through apologetic language. I'm sorry to bother you, but sorry if this is a stupid question. I hate to ask, but I don't mean to bother you, but, right?
Yeah.
Those questions are apologetic. And here is one that I do all the time, undermining our own accomplishments with language like it's no big deal, or
Mhm.
anyone could do this, or I got lucky, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
It wasn't that hard. I had a lot of help is actually a good one. I kind of
Yeah.
use that all the time. That's actually not bad.
Sure.
But in some cases, we find ourselves saying, like, because no one would expect us to be able to accomplish this, we say things like, I had a lot of help, which undermines our own participation in it.
Absolutely. Right.
Of course, negative self-talk, absolutes, right? Binary language, we talked like that. Dismissive phrases, it doesn't matter, who cares, it's not important. Oh, it's not
Mhm.
important when it might be important. Passive language, we get in a trap of passive language. It was decided that, or mistakes were made, right? Like
Mhm.
not able to take ownership or assign ownership of decisions. Tentative language, deflecting phrases, comparative minimizing. Well, at least it's not as bad as, or it could be worse than. Why are we even going down that road?
Right.
Um, and so I think having a sense of these categories of language is important, and there are they get bundled in three types, like sort of parent types of language issues. The first one's pragmatic language, right? We're not talking about just like turn taking or social cues. We're talking about difficulty reading between the lines, understanding sarcasm, and navigating group conversations. That's a thing that we sometimes struggle with because language isn't clear, right? Because the words that we use about ourselves are not clear and obvious.
Can I
Pragmatic
just
language.
say something about
Sure.
sarcasm? We were having this conversation between my daughter and my husband and I about the difference between being sarcastic and having like a sense of humor. And because my husband was saying, well, I think I'm sarcastic. And I'm like, both my daughter and like, well, no, you're really not sarcastic. You have a good sense of humor, but sarcasm sometimes feels more negative to me. Like
Mhm.
when somebody's being sarcastic, there's a little edge there that is kind of like, it feels like a little dig sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and that's not you. Like, that's not my husband at all.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, you're funny and you have a good sense of humor and you can see light of things, but I don't think you're sarcastic. And so I just think it's an interesting, when you're talking about it's difficult to understand sarcasm. It can be a really
Mhm.
difficult because you don't know, is this person trying to be funny or is this person really like, thinks whatever it is that they just said that feels mean.
I'm really glad you pull that out a little bit more thoroughly, because the challenge with sarcasm is that when a let's just say, binarily speaking, a neurotypical brain uses sarcasm as a joke by saying things like just, only, simply.
Hmm.
To us with ADHD, when we have internalized that language as non-sarcastic, right?
Correct. Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me, that language is damaging. For them, it's a joke. And that's where the rift happens, right?
Hmm.
That's where the
Hmm.
RSD comes, when I don't say anything
Right. Right.
about their joke.
And
To
then you're
them, it was,
ruminating in your
yeah,
head. What did they
right.
mean by that? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's where that gets hard. So pragmatic language, really tricky. Expressive language. This is the frustration that we have when we're dealing with word retrieval problems, right? This is the tip of the
Mm.
tongue issue. Like, I have a word and I can't get it. And so I use negative language about myself as I struggle to tell stories, structure narratives. I ramble because I can't find the language that I need to use. And it makes me speak ill of myself that much more, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
The answer to that problem is negative self talk, minimizing my own participation. And receptive language is the third big category, the challenges of processing information. And that includes in social situations, casual conversations, lectures, meetings, so classroom, work, wherever. It leads to misunderstanding and overwhelm because we deal with the same kind of, later retrieval issues, memory issues, and real-time processing all become a problem. So
Right.
I would love to turn it over to you and talk a little bit about the impacts of these things. Like, where
Sure.
do we see the challenges of these kinds of language issues, and in the people that you're working with? Where do they need help?
Yeah. Well, you actually have put down in our outline a lot, like kind of groups of categories of life, right? Like
Hmm.
where does it impact work, relationships, your social life, your executive functioning, connection? And I think that, when you think about like work specifically, we're looking at if you're having a difficult time processing the information that's coming into you through a meeting, then what do people tend to do? They don't want to ask for clarification because that makes them feel like they should have gotten it the first time, or they'll blame themselves for getting distracted and not listening or hearing all of it, or maybe
Hmm.
they heard it but they just didn't process it or actually like take it in. So I mean, I think that there's a lot of things that go along with the RSD that you started to mention, and all of those things that can happen because we're not understanding or misunderstanding what is happening in the situation, right? So,
Yeah.
relationships is huge. I mean, gosh, the especially when you have an ADHD partner and a non-ADHD partner, how those wires can get crossed,
Hmm.
how something can be said and it wasn't meant to be said that way, but that's how the other person took it. And then, how couples can fight and nitpick and, and then it becomes bigger issues. So I definitely see it there.
Well, and
Go
I
ahead.
I wanted to add, as I was thinking about relationships, I was thinking about initially about partners and my relationship with my wife. But
Yeah.
the truth is, like, I find myself completing her sentences not in a cute way. I interrupt and I realize, oh my gosh, I do that to my mother. I do that to friends, parents, children, coworkers. Like, it's a thing to be aware of. And it struck me, oh my God, it's everybody. Like,
Yeah.
relationships, I sometimes categorize when I use the word relationship as my emotional kind of relationships, and it's everybody. It's
Hmm.
everybody that So that was kind of an
Hmm.
aha for me.
Absolutely. Well, and it's easy too, if you're upset or you're frustrated with your partner, to say, can't you just do this? Like, can't
Hmm.
you just get this done and just have it be over with so we don't have to have the same argument over and over again?
Right.
Like that is not helpful.
Right.
It feels like it could be, but it's not. Uh, and I think that like the social piece of the language piece is that, especially if you have any kind of social anxiety, um, you only have so much energy to put into a social event if you have any kind of anxiety around that. And so that's stressful when you have to be in a position where you have to, do your best to listen. You have to make small talk. You have to like be on. You have to try not to be distracted by the things that are going on around you. I mean, all of this can be really exhausting
Hmm.
and and can affect, how often you want to go out and who you want to spend your time with. I mean,
Yeah.
it all impacts that. And as you mentioned with the interruptions, I think that's where the executive functioning connection comes in, is that you start to see more of the ADHD symptoms popping out, the impulsivity, blurting out thoughts, saying things that maybe you might regret later because you're not pausing, you're just
Hmm.
saying, you're just speaking. Emotional regulation, that isn't, a huge issue for ADHD. So if you have a lot of like strong feelings, like I saw it in you today in the introduction about Facebook, like
Yeah.
there was some emotional dysregulation going on there,
Hmm.
because you have some strong feelings about that. And not that you are dysregulated. I mean, you have every right to have those feelings. So don't get me wrong.
Did you just minimize me with language?
I just
You
minimized
just
you. Yeah.
minimized me right
I don't,
here.
I know. And I don't want to minimize you because that, but I also don't want to make you feel bad like that. I know it's hard being a human being
Yeah, it
with all
is.
these emotions. Yeah. But there's a lot of impact for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
There's definitely the language, what we say to ourselves, what we say to other people, how we communicate. It's a big thing, and it's a lot of layers to
Yeah.
try to figure out.
Well, and learning to identify that self-talk, like I'm a mess. I'll never get decluttered. My garage is going to constantly be a source of trouble. I'm
But I
so
kind of
dumb.
think mine will be.
My
I know we say that's a limiting belief, but I really feel like mine is always going to be a source of trouble. But
Yeah.
anyway, go ahead.
Well, there we go. There's our minimizing language example right now, right? That inner critic fuels our anxiety and procrastination and self-esteem.
Yeah,
Low self-esteem, right?
for sure.
That's what it does. And I think that the biggest challenge is learning how to actually challenge the critic, right? To question the validity of every self-judgment. Sometimes self-judgment is useful. Sometimes self-judgment gives us guidance for how to live in the world and in our own skin. And sometimes it's really, really negative. So I remember, did I tell you the story about my therapist, my whiteboarding therapist?
I don't remember. You might
I
have.
went to a therapist one time, but I stopped going to him because
After one time.
one time this was not. We just, sometimes you go to therapists and you don't jive. And this is why I wasn't jiving with that therapist, because just when we would get into something, he would stand up and walk over to a whiteboard on his wall and start diagramming something, right? He was teaching in the middle of our CBT kind of session. And I found that so distracting that I could not get to the other side of it. I was like, sit
Right.
down and listen to me,
listen to
grieve for you, and help me through that guidance. And stop whiteboarding. Just stop. But interestingly, the thing I took away from him that I've been digging into was actually a thought recording exercise that he gave me on this whiteboard. And I took a picture of it.
So isn't it funny that you don't like the whiteboard? However, you still took a picture of it and are now talking about it. Like, when was that this happened?
2015.
Okay, so here we are.
Almost 10 years later now.
And you're talking about
And
it.
I'm talking
I don't
about this
know. Maybe
exercise.
he had something there.
Well, he did. He could have just handed me a photocopy of something,
That's
right?
true.
Send me
That's
an email, man. It would have been fine. But this was it's a thought record exercise. It has been used in a number of different fashions over the years, but it was originated by Dr. Aaron Beck in the 60s, right?
Okay, interesting.
And so it's structured journaling. And this is a system that I think is actually interesting in the way that it allows you to separate emotion from events in a really organized way. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to describe the situation. So situation one, and I'm actually one. There's no acronym for this. This is 7 steps, and the acronym would be SMIAM. That's the structured journal. Okay, so situation. Describe the specific situation that triggered the negative thought or feeling that you're dealing with. The thought that would normally encourage your negative language, right? Like, the example in this case is like, my boss gave me feedback on a presentation, right? That's not negative or positive. It just exists, right? It's concise and factual. What would you normally do about that? You would describe that in your sort of mood, right? That's the next step. Mood. Identify the emotions you experienced in that situation, not redefining the situation, right? Not saying my boss gave me horrible feedback and made me feel like a little teeny tiny person. Just that my boss gave me feedback. That's the situation. And the mood is I experienced anger, shame, fear, and give those a rating on a scale of 0 to 100%, right? Say I was 80% anxious and 60% discouraged, right?
Okay.
Now, The automatic thoughts, diagramming the automatic thoughts is step 3. These are the immediate, often negative thoughts that pop into your head during the situation, right? These are the negative self-talk thoughts, the hot thoughts. I messed up the presentation. My boss thinks I'm an idiot. I'm absolutely going to get fired because I'm dumb. And those are just the things that pop into your head that are going to drive the rest of your day, right?
Okay. Yeah, into a huge RSD spiral.
And then we get to go into emotional CSI, right? I love procedural crime.
Love that.
Yeah. Now we have to document, step 4, document supporting evidence for that hot thought, right? I am definitely going to get fired. What is the specific factual evidence that supports that thought? As objectively as you can do it. Example might be, I stumbled over my words a couple of times in my presentation. My boss pointed out a few areas for improvement, right? So here we are documenting why you think this evidence is going to hold up in your emotional court to support you being an idiot, right?
Yep.
Step 5 is evidence against your hot thought. So now you're the defense and you're standing up and you're saying, look, list your factual evidence that contradicts that thinking. This is where I get to say the presentation actually went smoothly. In spite of the stuff that I documented in number 4, my boss praised my research and visuals. I received positive feedback on my work in the past, right? I have earned reputational points in the bank. So that all stands against that hot thought of I'm going to get fired. Of course, I'm going to get fired. All of that is against that. So now I have been both the prosecution and the defense in my case against my negative language. And then step 6, alternative and balanced thought. So based on all this evidence against the hot thought, you formulate a more balanced and realistic perspective. So your example is now, hey, how can I reframe that negative language? I made a few mistakes, but that's normal. I have given myself an opportunity to learn and improve. My boss is now giving me constructive feedback to help me grow. My job is not in jeopardy because of this. My next presentation will be even better as a result. Which doesn't, even better is a great language, because even better does not
say that it was
imply that the existing one was bad. Right. That is
It's
incredibly
just gonna
useful
even be better.
reframing
Yeah.
language.
I
right?
love that. Yeah.
And step 7 is going back to moods. Moods, to re-rate your mood. So after considering all of the writing that you've just done, you re-rate the intensity of that initial emotion, right? And you see how you can shift. That shift in perspective can directly impact your feelings almost in the moment, right? And now you say, I was anxious at 80%. Now I'm anxious at 30%. I was discouraged at 60%. Now I'm discouraged at 10%. And there you go. So those are the 7 steps. Like you said, Nikki will post this. We'll post this in a blog post and we'll drop it in the show notes for the link. So be aware of that. Because what we're trying to do here is just increase our awareness of our own language. And that is the number one takeaway from this show, is how or can you become more aware of the language that you use in your own head, in your own internal reflection of yourself. How can you challenge negativity? How can you reduce emotional reactivity and those irrational emotional responses? How can you regain some problem solving, creativity, and clarity? So
this is great.
That's where we stand.
Thank you, Pete. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. This was, like I said, this is one that sometimes we get these topics that come easily to me because I live so deeply in the heart of them that I'm just really thinking about them a lot. And
wow, this is great.
I don't always get it right, but I know that every time I challenge them, I'm even better as a result.
Yes. And even though the therapist didn't work out, you were still able to walk away from something that is very valuable. And, it's good. I love it.
And clearly, for some people, they need a whiteboarding therapist.
And for some people, you don't.
Yep.
I get it.
There you go.
Thank you, everyone. This was great.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. Thank you for your time and your attention. Don't forget, if you have something to contribute to the show about this conversation, we're heading over to the Show Talk channel in the Discord server, and you can join us right there by becoming a supporting member at the deluxe level or better. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll see you right back here next week on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.
Hey everyone, it's Nikki Kinzer. If you're tired of the daily struggle to manage tasks and time, you're not alone. I'm excited to let you know that enrollment is now open for our GPS Planning Membership Program. GPS is a vibrant community where we tackle ADHD head-on with weekly planning sessions, personalized resources, and real support. From beginners to advanced planners, our program meets you where you are and helps you grow. Don't miss this chance to reframe your ADHD experience from chaos to control. Enrollment closes January 29th. Head over to takecontroladhd.com and secure your spot today.